In 1978, the fastest American production vehicle from 0 to 100 miles an hour wasn't a Corvette. It wasn't a Trans Am. It wasn't anything with a trunk, a hood scoop, or a performance badge that anyone would have expected. It was a pickup truck, a bright red Dodge with a wood-lined bed, chrome smokestack exhaust pipes borrowed straight from an 18-wheeler, and an engine that had absolutely no business being that quick in an era when nearly every genuine muscle car in America had already been strangled down to a fraction of its former power. This isn't a countdown of 10 cars from a single year. This is the story of the Dodge Lil Red Express, the muscle truck that found a loophole nobody else in Detroit had thought to exploit and used it to become, for one brief, unforgettable model year, too powerful for the same regulations that had already crushed everything else on the road. This is the story of a truck that beat the Corvette using nothing more than a technicality, a federal weight classification written for hauling lumber and gravel, turned into the single biggest performance loophole of the entire late 1970s. By the end of this episode, you'll understand exactly how a company that had already lost the Hemi, the 446 barrel, and nearly every other legendary muscle car engine to emissions regulations found one last, completely unexpected way to keep genuine American performance alive. By 1978, the muscle car era that this entire series has spent so many episodes celebrating was, for all practical purposes, dead. The Environmental Protection Agency's catalytic converter mandate, in place since 1975, had strangled nearly every performance engine in America down to a shadow of its former self. Chrysler's own performance flagship that year, the Dodge Magnum XE, offered an optional 400 cubic inch V8, producing a genuinely disappointing 190 horsepower and an 18.9-second quarter mile, numbers that would have embarrassed an ordinary family sedan just 8 years earlier. But there was one corner of the federal regulatory code that nobody in Detroit's passenger car divisions had fully exploited. Light trucks weighing over 6,000 pounds gross vehicle weight rating were exempt from the catalytic converter mandate entirely, a rule written with cargo hauling work trucks in mind, never intended as a performance loophole. Dodge's engineers, including several members of the same legendary Ramchargers drag racing team that had helped develop the 426 Hemi more than a decade earlier, noticed something the rest of the industry had missed. Dodge's own short-wheelbase D150 pickup happened to sit just over that exact weight threshold. The team behind the Lil Red Express wasn't some anonymous corporate engineering committee. It was the Ramchargers, the same group of Chrysler engineers who had raced together under that name throughout the 1960s, helping develop some of the most feared drag racing Hemis in American history. By the mid-1970s, most of the engines and rules that had defined their earlier careers were gone entirely, but the truck loophole gave them one more genuine project worth pursuing. Starting with the smallest, lightest configuration of Dodge's D150 pickup, a single-cab, two-wheel drive truck with the short Utiline cargo box, they built a genuine performance machine almost entirely out of parts already sitting in Chrysler's own inventory, repurposed from decades of prior racing and police package development work. Under the hood sat Chrysler's 360 cubic inch small block V8, but not the ordinary version sold in Dodge's regular truck lineup. This one was based on a police-spec Pursuit tune, fitted with a high-flow 4-barrel carburetor sitting on a high-rise intake manifold borrowed from Chrysler's law enforcement parts catalog, paired with a considerably more aggressive camshaft, dual valve springs, a roller timing chain, and a windage tray in the oil pan to keep oil under control during hard acceleration. Because the engine had already been certified for legal road use in its police package form, and because the finished truck's weight weighting placed it outside the passenger car emissions rules entirely, Dodge's engineers were free to tune it for genuine performance without a catalytic converter choking off the exhaust. Exhaust gases exited through a pair of genuinely high-flow mufflers, feeding into twin chrome smokestacks mounted directly behind the cab, both a functional performance feature and, quite deliberately, one of the most recognizable styling statements Detroit produced during the entire decade. Officially, Dodge rated the Lil Red Express at 225 horsepower and 295 pound-feet of torque, roughly 50 more horsepower than an ordinary D150, and more power than any other American-built performance vehicle on the market that entire year. When Car and Driver magazine tested the truck for its November 1977 issue, running it head-to-head against the field that included the Chevrolet Corvette L82, the Pontiac Trans Am TA400, and a Saab Turbo, the results stunned the entire automotive press. The Lil Red Express recorded the fastest sprint to 100 miles an hour of any American-built vehicle in the entire test, hitting that benchmark in somewhere between 19.4 and 19.9 seconds, depending on the specific test run, and covering the quarter mile in roughly 14.7 seconds at 93 miles an hour. Those numbers were quicker than a Porsche 928, quicker than a Porsche 911 SC, and quicker than a Ferrari 308 GTS, all from a work truck with a bench seat and a column-mounted automatic shifter. Nothing captured the sheer absurdity of the Lil Red Express's performance quite like its direct comparison to Chevrolet's own flagship sports car that same year. The 1978 Corvette, even in its strongest available L82 configuration, was producing around 220 horsepower, genuinely respectable for the emission-strangled late 1970s, but no longer capable of embarrassing much of anything on a drag strip. In a straight sprint to 100 miles an hour, Dodge's little pickup truck, wearing wood paneling and Western-style lettering on its doors, actually beat it. It's one of the most genuinely surprising upsets in this entire series. A truck built almost as an afterthought, using parts largely borrowed from a police package and a decade-old drag racing program, outrunning the single most celebrated performance nameplate General Motors still had left standing. The Lil Red Express's engineering trick went even deeper than simply avoiding a catalytic converter. Federal regulations at the time allowed an engine that had already been certified for legal road use, like Chrysler's existing Police Package 360, to be modified afterward without triggering a fresh, considerably more expensive recertification process, as long as the modification stayed within certain bounds. That meant Dodge's engineers could legally upgrade an already certified engine with a hotter camshaft, freer flowing exhaust, and a more aggressive carburetor, all without needing to run the entire package back through the EPA's full certification gauntlet from scratch. It was a loophole layered inside another loophole, one exploiting the truck's weight classification and a second exploiting the rules around modifying an engine that had already cleared federal certification once before. Dodge didn't just build a fast truck, it built one that looked like absolutely nothing else on the road, and made sure everyone noticed. Finished in a bright canyon red paint with gold pinstriping, the Little Red Express rode on 15-inch chrome slotted wheels wrapped in raised white letter Goodyear tires, with genuine oak wood forming the bed floor and trim along the tailgate, sanded, varnished, and fastened with chrome-plated bolts. Western-style lettering spelled out the truck's name across the doors, and those unmistakable chrome smokestack exhaust pipes rose up directly behind the cab, giving the entire truck a genuinely unique, almost old-fashioned hot rod silhouette that stood apart from every other performance vehicle Detroit was building that year. Marketed as part of Dodge's adult toys lineup and later nicknamed the last American hot rod, the truck's styling was every bit as deliberate a statement as its engineering. Unlike some of the more obscure one-year specials covered elsewhere in this series, the Lil Red Express actually found real commercial success. Despite arriving late in the model year, with a release date pushed back to late March of 1978, Dodge still managed to sell more than 2,000 units in that first partial season. Word of the truck's genuinely shocking performance, combined with its distinctive styling, spread quickly enough that Dodge more than doubled sales the following year, moving over 7,000 combined units across the 1978 and 1979 model years. For a company that had already lost nearly every one of its legendary performance nameplates to emissions regulations and insurance surcharges over the previous half-decade, the Lil Red Express represented something genuinely rare: proof that real demand for American performance hadn't actually disappeared. It had simply been waiting for someone to find the right loophole. The Little Red Express's moment in the spotlight, remarkable as it was, never had much room to last. Federal regulators had already signaled that the light truck weight exemption would close for the 1979 model year, and Dodge knew from the very beginning that this loophole came with a built-in expiration date. For 1979, every Dodge truck received a mandatory catalytic converter along with a milder camshaft to accommodate it. And while the official horsepower rating stayed identical on paper, most historians and owners agree the truck's real-world performance took a genuine step backward once the emissions equipment went on. The Little Red Express nameplate continued for that second model year, riding largely on the strength of its reputation and distinctive styling. But the truck that had genuinely outrun a Corvette in 1978 was mechanically already a noticeably different, noticeably tamer machine just 12 months later. It's worth asking why, if this loophole was sitting right there in the federal regulations the entire time, other American manufacturers didn't rush to build their own versions of the same idea. Part of the answer is timing. By the time the Lil Red Express proved just how effective the loophole could be, federal regulators were already moving to close it for the following model year, leaving competitors very little runway to develop and certify their own version before the window shut for good. Part of the answer is also institutional memory. Dodge happened to have the Ramchargers, a team with genuine drag racing engineering pedigree and deep existing access to police package performance parts already sitting in Chrysler's own inventory, ready to be repurposed almost immediately. Not every manufacturer had that exact combination of expertise, spare parts, and timing sitting ready to go the moment somebody noticed the loophole existed. Despite genuinely legendary performance credentials for its era, the Lil Red Express has never quite achieved the same widespread recognition as the muscle cars covered throughout the rest of the series, a pattern that echoes several other genuinely underrated vehicles this channel has already told the story of. Part of that comes down to simple categorization. Muscle car collectors, magazines, and historians have traditionally organized the entire golden age around cars, Chevelles, GTOs, Mustangs, Roadrunners, leaving a genuinely remarkable performance truck sitting somewhat outside the usual conversation, even when its actual numbers held up against, and in some cases, beat cars that get far more attention and far higher auction prices today. Looking back across this entire series, the Lil Red Express stands as something genuinely unique, the very last successful loophole of the muscle car era, arriving years after Pontiac's displacement rule workaround built a GTO, years after Oldsmobile's outside contractor trick built a Hearst Olds, and years after nearly every other creative regulatory workaround covered throughout this channel had already been closed off one by one. It's a fitting bookend to the entire story this series has told. Model year after model year, Detroit's engineers, faced with an ever-tightening set of rules, consistently finding one more clever way to keep genuine performance alive, right up until the very last possible moment the regulations allowed it. So what does this truck story actually prove? That even in 1978, at what felt like the absolute lowest point of the entire American performance car story, a handful of engineers who remembered exactly how the old horsepower war used to work found one more genuine loophole to exploit. Not in a sports car, not in a muscle car, but in a federal weight classification written for people hauling lumber. That real demand for genuine American performance never fully disappeared, even during the darkest years of the emissions crackdown. It had simply been waiting for someone clever enough and fast enough to find the last remaining crack in the rulebook before regulators closed it for good. The Lil Red Express never got the magazine covers or the decades of collector mythology that turned cars like the GTO or the Hemi Cuda into household names. But for one brief, remarkable model year, a bright red pickup truck with a wood-lined bed and chrome smokestacks did something that genuinely deserves to be remembered. It beat a Corvette, using nothing but a loophole, a police package engine, and a team of engineers who simply refused to let the muscle car era die quietly. Did you know a pickup truck actually outran the Corvette in 1978? Or is this the first time you're hearing the Lil Red Express's story? Did your father, your uncle, or a neighbor on your street ever own one of these trucks? And did they ever tell you it could outrun a sports car? Write the story in the comments below.